So good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. As it says on the screen, we are going to be talking about balconies, terraces, and concrete surfaces today. For anybody that's joined our webinars before, as per usual, at the very end, we will be doing an open forum Q&A. However, if at any point during the presentation, you do have any questions that you don't want to forget, please feel free to post them in the chat and we will get around to them at the end. All right, so starting off with balconies and terraces, a lot of people I think may primarily think of the surface covering the very top of the building as the roof surface. However, these areas, balconies and terraces, are also roof surfaces and have many common issues that require attention. The membrane type and roof system can vary on balconies and terraces, but is really important, especially because these areas tend to experience a lot more foot traffic than the upper and main roof surfaces. Just to clarify here, when we're talking about the membrane type, that we're specifically talking about the waterproofing membrane, and then the roof system would be whatever protective layer is covering that. So very often on balconies, if they're not a bare concrete surface, we'll often see insulation and paving stones or wood decking or decorative tiles to offer some protection to the membrane layer. So as with the upper roof surfaces, these areas can of course experience leaks, whether it's in the unit below, if it's coming back into the unit where the balcony is, or to any common surfaces below. So I think sometimes there tend to be more leak issues in these areas for various reasons. So we just want to look at some of the common issues that we see specifically with balcony and terrace surfaces, and then we will go into a bit more about concrete surfaces specifically. So one of the main things is drainage. So some of the common drainage issues that we see on balconies could be insufficient slope to the drains that are on the roof surfaces. It could be small drainage holes if it's an overflow drain, large volumes of water, whether it's from heavy rainfall or flash floods or any major leaks that are occurring. Or commonly we will also see limited path for the water to travel below the deck system or the inverted system that's in place above the membrane layer. So on the balcony surfaces, there are a variety of different drainage options, but ultimately it's going to be however the building was installed. So at one of the buildings that we work at, it has most of the balconies, not all of them, have these very tiny overflow drainage holes on the balconies. So as you can imagine, if these get blocked with anything, or if there's a lot of rainfall happening at once, there's going to be excessive ponding and buildup of water on these roof surfaces. On the other side of the balcony, there's just a small opening for the water to drain out from there. So again, with heavy rainfall, you have the water ponding not only below the paving stones. When you're lifting them, you see that it's completely pulled underneath. It's coming up above the paving stones. There is potential for it to rise up over the doorway into the unit there. In this particular case, as you can imagine, the drain was blocked with something. So once the debris and blockages were removed, you can see in the last photo on the bottom right there that the water did drain off of there. So this is one of the reasons why it is important to ensure that the drains are clear and unblocked at all times in case of situations like this. So again, if you do have a situation like this where the water is ponding and rising above certain levels, there are various ways that the water can enter, whether it's along the side of the stripping membrane or any unsealed penetrations or railing posts, if there's any inadequate waterproofing along the doorway, or if it's getting, again, up above the doorway or into the metal flashing details along the side, this can, of course, cause leak issues. So aside from making sure that the drains are clear, there are a few options that can help to encourage adequate drainage on the balcony surfaces. So one thing that we see quite commonly on balcony surfaces are these raised bi-level drains. So an option here would be to drill a hole or a couple holes into the drain, again, just to help encourage adequate drainage if there is a lot of heavy rainfall or a lot of water built up on the balcony surface. In cases like this, it would still be essential to make sure that the drains are cleared and unblocked, because if any debris did get inside of the drain, it still could slow down the drainage, but this can be very helpful for any heavy rain buildup. Very similarly, we do see this on larger terrace surfaces as well. So in the top left photo, the two arrows that you see there, the green arrow, that area in particular was experiencing really excessive ponding water. And the drain location, the nearest drain location on this roof surface was over where that orange arrow is. The photo below does show some of the water coming up where the drain is, coming up through between the paving stones. So in this case, it was just, there wasn't a clear path for the water to be traveling below the inverted roof system when there was heavy rainfall. So whether it is on a larger roof surface or a smaller balcony that does have an inverted system, one of the options here to encourage adequate drainage would be channeled insulation. So that would just be the regular roofing insulation, but with channels cut within it. It can either be cut into the existing installation, or there's specific channeled installation that can be purchased from various suppliers. And again, the idea here is just to encourage the water to travel through a clearer path beneath the inverted roof system when there is a heavy accumulation of rain. Membrane defects. So very similar to any of the other roof surfaces throughout the building, there can of course be membrane defects for a variety of reasons. One of the things that we see very commonly is if there is a patio surface, a balcony, a terrace that has a single ply membrane that is not covered by any sort of protective roof system, we do see a number of defects and leaks in these areas, again, because of the higher foot traffic and just more objects on these surfaces. So something even as small as a little tiny hole in the membrane, or if there's any split open seams, these can of course be areas for water to infiltrate and cause potential leak issues. Another concern with this type of membrane, if it isn't covered, is it can visually not be very appealing if you do have all these leak issues and require constant repairs, and then have all these patches throughout the patio surfaces. So other membrane damages we see on the balcony surfaces, we see a lot of issues with the stripping or the flashing membrane on these surfaces. These areas in particular can be weaker points just because of the natural movement of the building. We tend to see issues with the stripping or the flashing before issues with the field. But when these membrane systems are being installed on balconies, they're being installed in hundreds of areas, and this stripping membrane is more of a detailed work. So especially on balcony surfaces, we tend to see areas where deterioration is happening faster in the stripping, or corners were cut, or areas were missed because there's so much being done so quickly. So again, when the areas are exposed, if there's any splits, cracks, openings in the membrane, that can be areas where water's getting in, even in cases where there's not heavy rainfall. Even if it's lighter rainfall, if there's openings as severe as some of these ones, it can cause potential leak issues. Penetration. So again, very commonly, as well as the upper roof surfaces, any exposed penetrations or penetrations that have deteriorated sealant on them do need to be looked at and addressed so that they don't cause potential leak issues on balconies, especially because you have the penetrations from the railings, not only going into the field membrane, but into the side as well with the bolt penetrations. This is something that you want to be monitoring and making sure that they are adequately sealed, because again, if they are exposed and there's any openings there, or the sealant deteriorates to the point that there's cracks in it, then these are weak points that are very common leak issues. So now looking at concrete surfaces. So like other roof surfaces, concrete balconies are exposed to the elements at all times, not only just on the balcony surfaces, but in other areas, whether it be a mechanical room, garbage room, parking garage, or more. These areas are under constant stress from various traffic and elements. So having a coating system in place will help to preserve the concrete surfaces, especially in cases where any cracking or deterioration has already begun. So here, just a bit of an overview of some cracks and deteriorations occurring both on balcony surfaces as well as mechanical room surfaces. So this is definitely something that you want to be mindful of and address as soon as possible. Not only can leaks stemming from concrete be tricky to diagnose, because water traveling through concrete can happen very, very slowly. So if you have a leak coming from these areas, it's unlikely that it's going to pour into the building and be very obvious. It can travel very slowly and through different paths when it's going through the concrete. And in these cases, not only is it going to be a concern for any interior cosmetic damages, but prolonged water infiltration is of course also a structural concern. So any cracks and deterioration you'd want to get addressed as soon as possible. Another thing to be mindful of with any concrete deterioration, or if you are having a coating project done, is any of the transitions or upturns. So the transitions, that would be where the wall is meeting, where the field is meeting the wall, or any curbs, making sure that those aren't cracking, that they're adequately sealed, that the coating is not only being applied to the field, but is going 4 to 6 inches up the side of the wall, depending on the specific makeup of the area where it's being applied. So here we have some after photos of some recent coating jobs completed. So not only does it look nice and new and refreshed, but it's also helping to preserve these concrete surfaces. And in the case of the upper photos, there was actually a unit in this room that was slowly leaking. And again, the concrete floors were not sealed before this, so it wasn't like there was a coating that was removed. It was just bare concrete that had deteriorated and was causing a leak issue. So the unit was repaired by others. We had done the floors, so to date there have been no further leak issues. Now, when it comes to types of coating for concrete, there are a variety of different types out there. Some of the most common ones are epoxy and polyurethane, and even within those two different categories, there's a number of different brands and different coating options. So both the epoxy and the polyurethane are multi-component mixed resins. The epoxy is overall a thicker coat than the polyurethane. However, it can be harder to remove when inevitable replacement is required. With the epoxy, there is a lower upfront cost. The polyurethane is more costly upfront. However, the epoxy does have a shorter lifespan, and for that reason also has a shorter manufacturer's warranty. Polyurethanes are better suited for outdoor use, not only due to the longer lifespan, but also because of the flexibility of the product and the higher temperature and UV resistance. So having a coating with flexibility is really ideal, especially for any outdoor areas like balconies or pool decks or any other concrete surfaces, because of the fact that we deal with such severe weather fluctuations and harsh weather. So you want something that's going to be flexible and be able to move with the natural movement of the building and withstand all the various weather events that we experience. Some things to consider if you are completing a concrete coating project at your building. One thing is that the preparation of these surfaces is extremely important, if not the most important part of the process. If the surfaces are not properly prepared, then the product is not going to adhere properly and is not going to last as long. So the preparation commonly is going to include grinding the surfaces down, power washing the surfaces, using caulking or a sealant to seal any existing cracks or terminations throughout. It is best practice to complete a test patch prior to completing the whole project, especially if the area being completed is a larger square footage. You want to ensure that the product that you're using is going to be compatible with the surface that's there, especially in cases where you're replacing an existing coating and not going on top of just bare concrete. Something to consider is that between each of the coats, there is cure time required. So that could extend the length of the project. And again, the area where the coating is being completed would be inaccessible for the duration of the project, not only when the project is, when workers are actually on site doing the project, but again, because of the cure time, you don't want anybody walking through there or anything moving through there. That's going to affect the curing process and then potentially damage the product, and it will not be applied properly. Full transparency, these projects can be quite disruptive depending on where they're taking place. So again, because of the preparation of the surfaces with the grinding and the power washing, if that's happening on a balcony surface, you would want to notify the residents below that this is going to be occurring because there could be some runoff from the balcony or noise disruption. If it is happening in a parking garage or a garbage room, then of course those areas are going to be inaccessible for the length of the project, which could be an issue depending on the parking or garbage requirements at the building. One other thing, I apologize, is not on here, but when it comes to the specific types of products being used, if there's ever anything where you want more information about the actual product, every material will have both a technical data and a safety data sheet. So it is something that if you want the exact specifications of the product, you can always ask us or whichever contractor you have running the project for this information, so that you have more information, or if you need to share it with the board so they have a better understanding of the product being applied. So overall, what can management or residents do to limit any issues on balcony and terrace roof surfaces? So again, due to the amount of issues that stem from drains, number one is knowing where the drains are located can be very, very helpful in case of emergency. So again, if there's really heavy rains or any flash flooding occurring, knowing where the drains are in case you need to quickly check them and unblock them to prevent any flooding issues can be very, very helpful. Reporting any ponding or rising water levels right away, so that if there are any issues, any defects in the membrane, or any unsealed penetrations, you can get somebody in to deal with that as soon as possible before it causes severe leak issues. Ensuring that the drains are clear and unblocked where accessible, and then avoiding any use of heavy, sharp, damaging objects on exposed roof systems. So again, those ones that are just the membrane layer without any protective layer on top of that, especially in the case of the single ply membranes, because those are very easily punctured and do generally cause a lot of leak issues in our experience. So that's all for today. If anybody has any questions, again, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. At this point, I don't see anything in the chat, so if anybody has any questions.
I have a question. How difficult it is to add, let's say we're talking about an interior job, how difficult it is to add this draining pipes to an area that's like made out of concrete blocks and it's a finished area. What I'm thinking is we have a walkway in our P1 that has no drainage at all. So like when we want to wash it, all the water ponds there. So we're actually considering adding some kind of a drainage to it. How
You would
difficult it is
have
to do it?
It would depend on a couple of things. You'd have to core along the concrete to have a hole, and then you'd have to figure out where the connection for the plumbing pipes would be. So, and when you core, you have to do an X-ray of the concrete to find out what's in there. So, if you want to send over some pictures, we can take a look at it for you, and then I might be able to give a more detailed answer.
Okay, so we have to do a, what did you say?
Coring, you'd have to basically, yeah, part of coring is the X-ray the ground to see, make sure that they're cutting the hole in the right place, so there's no rebar or anything like that they're cutting through. So that's part of it, but you'd also have to see where the drainage pipes would connect to the ground. It could be a very, very large job, or it could be simple. It depends on a lot of factors, unfortunately. But if you send them over, then I can take a look at it.
Yeah, I'll send over and I'll send some measurement. I don't think we can actually connect it to any drainage pipe because there's nothing in the area. So it would just be draining down in the parking spot.
Okay, you might be able to do a downspout or something like that to redirect it to a floor drain that may be nearby. We can take a look at it.
Okay, I'll send you guys some pictures.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Bye-bye.